Last episode on Pokémon. Game Freak released a video game so buggy and also ugly that the entire gaming community sent viral videos of its bugs to each other on Twitter for at least an entire week. Interestingly enough, the game actually has its merits, and when it comes to gameplay, actually does some things pretty well. Will Game Freak be given the time and resources necessary for Pokémon to improve as a series within the third dimension? Or will corporate greed, absurd deadlines, and overall disappointment continue to plague the series? Well, shit, I don't know. I don't make the damn games. You know, I always get a little upset when I think about modern Pokemon games. Yeah, you know, Scarlet and Violet are a thing and people made fun of them, but like at the same time, there is still some good game in there somewhere. And and then I think about how awful the Diamond and Pearl remakes were, but then I think about how much fun I had playing Pokemon Legends Arceus, and it's like, okay guys, what's going on here? We have such a wide variety of quality and ideas happening all throughout the games, and it's so frustrating to see this because it's like, dude, Pokemon should be the game, man. Pokemon as an IP has such insane potential that it hurts. We have an entire generation that grew up playing during the initial Pokemon craze who have all dreamed of what a fully realized Pokemon game and world could look like and be with like high fidelity and polish and world design. Everyone thought that the Switch would finally be the console to firmly establish that game. And while we have gotten games that sort of give us that, it's still not really there yet. Pokemon Legends Arceus has been the closest I've felt to that same feeling I got as a kid when playing a Pokemon game. That feeling of excitement and wonder about exploring a brand new world, not knowing what's going on or what's going to happen next, that feeling is what Pokemon needs. That sense of wonder, and honestly, it kind of feels like Game Freak has lost the fact that that is the priority, right? When I think back to my favorite Pokemon games, besides the actual Pokemon, right, that's kind of a given, the world is what really is at the forefront of those games. The region itself and how it's actually designed, that might be the most important part of the series besides the creatures themselves. This brings us to the main things. 1, the world itself. 2, how the Pokemon interact in that world. And 3, how the player interacts in the world. That loop has so much room for expanding on, and we've just not seen that yet to the degree that would give us a universally praised game. We have seen the recent games experiment with new mechanics, which has been great, right? The loop Pokemon Arceus has, it was honestly really fun and addicting. I love the ability for Pokemon to feel imposing, right? And the whole alpha Pokemon thing, that helped that out a lot.
Oh, yo! Dude, you look huge. Oh, ladies, what's good?
Okay, I didn't mean imposing it like that way, you know? Yeah, let's move on. You actually need to aim and throw Pokeballs, and you have all the interactions around being like an actual player character in a world with Pokemon that can actually interact with you. You get to sneak around, throw food, dodge attacks, etc. Like, all of this was honestly great and made the way to experience the world just feel so much more engaging. This is the experience of being a Pokemon trainer that many of us had in our heads, kind of finally being realized in some form. But as much fun as I had playing Pokemon Arceus, I couldn't help but think how much this was kind of just laying the groundwork for something that should be much greater. So let's break this down though, right? Let's talk about the world itself. We're going to use Pokemon Arceus here as the example, as I think the dynamic nature of the player gameplay fits better for this point. Let's try to think of some of the best standout locations in that game. Okay, so we have the main village. We've got that giant tree in the forest. We've got the beach area, the volcano, I guess, although it is kind of bland. There's those small villages. There's like 2 of them, one in the Iceland and one in like the mud area. The big temple thing, that was interesting. And then Spear Pillar, right? I'm probably missing some. I gotta be, but these are just ones I could think off the top of my head. Now let's compare that to one of like the 2D Pokemon games. And I don't think it matters too much, but let's just choose one from Gen like 3 through 5 or so. Let's go with Gen 3. So you have Rustboro City, first change of pace city, kind of big. There's a lot of things to do. There's like a museum. You've got the cave near that, which is interesting. It's got a different tile set than some of the other caves. The island that you take the boat to, you take a boat, and that's also interesting. There's like a boat ride. There's the cave on that island. It's a little different. It's dark now, so it's a change of pace from Rustboro's cave. Of course, there's Slateport City. It's just a port town, and there's lots to do and see in there. Of course, you've got the biking bridge, which is interesting. There's the mystery house. You have the desert. It has a sandstorm, and it's got that fossil tower, which is a interesting little dungeon thing. You've got the sunken ship. You've got the route that has the ashes falling. You've got the moon-like cave. You get the point here. I can go on and on. Like, you have the city that you literally have to dive to and then surface up inside this like crater lake-esque situation, and it's so unique. And there are so many of these unique environments in that world, right? So you kind of get the point, right? Like, the amount of memorable locations, it exceeds probably what we get in Arceus and Scarlet and Violet combined. Yeah, I know what you're gonna say, Stony. You don't like the modern Pokemon worlds as much as you used to because you're just not a kid anymore. Everybody knows that. You just remember the older game more fondly, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, I don't know, man. I don't really think that's the case. I wasn't really a little kid anymore in high school when I was playing Black and White 1 and 2, and I can say the same thing about that world design. There is a clear distinction these games have with the world design, like I mentioned. The thing is, this fix is honestly not that hard to conceptualize. We've seen Game Freak attempt to make open world Pokemon games in 3D now a couple of times, and what needs to improve is it's just implementing more interesting and diverse locations with more to do within the region itself that feels substantial. The way the world seems to be designed currently feels, it's kind of like, okay, we have this big zone, let's spice it up by doing the classic snowy area over here, we're gonna have the rocky area over there, and it's like, okay, that's a start, but if we really want to make something more interesting, we're gonna need to just insert more defined locations. I mean, obviously more towns would be great, right? Like more actual town locations, because those are the easy ones. You can have a bunch of different style of buildings and architecture in each location, and then you can use these towns as connective tissue for the routes to be interesting as well, right? That gives you some sort of foundation to work upon. Scarlet and Violet at least had like a decent amount of them scattered around the world, but I don't know, they still didn't nearly hit as hard as some of the towns in the past games. I feel like they were somewhat integrated into the environment well, but they didn't really have that refined feel as they should. They mostly all lack any interiors, them running like garbage doesn't really help. And they also just kind of lack any memorable NPCs or really standout points of interest. Another thing is we need to go back to having more instance like caves and tower locations and stuff like that, right? Like you can go into and it's kind of like an entirely different feel in there. I feel like the 3D Pokemon games, they haven't really done that much. Instead, the caves have kind of really felt samey and very bland. It's like you go into a cave and it's the same thing everywhere. One cave is just really boring and it's a straight line usually, and there's really no diversity, right? There's no unique things to look at. It's like, okay, we can get very interesting dungeon types. We've done this before in the 2D games, You have stuff like the Mystery House in Pokemon Emerald, or you have things like Meteor Falls. And it's like, these look different. There's interesting things going on in here. We can even look at something like Black and White. You have things like the Celestial Tower, Chargestone Cave, the Relic Castle, Pinwheel Forest, the Cold Storage, right? I can keep going on and on. Another thing that will help to facilitate interesting world design is to kind of have NPCs in locations and probably cities who, they want to give you a quest or a mission, right? To go investigate something something interesting, and then you can build ideas off of that, right? Like let's take example gold and silver. Once you get to the city with the Bellsprout Tower, everybody in the city is talking about that. It's a staple landmark. These people know it. They're gonna let you know it, and it's like, cool, okay, let me go explore that thing. Let's do more of that. That would be great. And I know these things, they really do require, you know, a lot of thought and input to make, but like these are the things that really make a world stand out. These unique locations. So now let's talk about the Pokemon's role within the world. I think we took a step back by removing the ability for the Pokemon to attack the player in Scarlet and Violet. Having Pokemon in the world and being able to see them roam around and stuff is great, right? But it doesn't feel as exciting as it should if all the Pokemon do is walk around a few steps. If I walk into an area and there's just a massive ass Tyranitar hanging out, it should feel like there's literally a mini Godzilla in front of me capable of fucking my ass up. This then forces the player to also interact with the environment or items, and you have to tactically think about what you're gonna do in this situation. Are you gonna catch this thing? Are you gonna battle it? What's going on? This creates stakes, and it makes for a memorable experience. We need more of this. Imagine a Pokemon world where going out into the ocean and having a bunch of Gyarados roll up on you, it feels like that one episode from the anime, and it's actually just really tense and scary. That would be awesome. Something else that would be nice is kind of having more diversity for what the Pokemon can do when they're roaming around, right? But I think we can reference back to Pokemon Arceus again, which I do a lot because I did enjoy that game. You know, you had like parts where there'd be a flying Gyarados in the sky, and it's like, holy shit, what? Wow, that's cool. You know, it would be cooler if it wasn't at 5 frames a second, but you know, it was cool. But like, besides these few moments, for the most part, the Pokemon did really just kind of walk around like a couple of steps back and forth. And then besides the Pokemon having more diversity in what they can do, it would be cool if the Pokemon could actually kind of interact with each other in the environment in more natural ways, right? Like, let's say we get to see like a Spearow pick up a Weedle or something like that, and it's in the sky eating it. I mean, I don't know if that's actually accurate to the lore, but you know, stuff like that, right? Thing is, these things would take quite a bit of time, and honestly, it's like frustrating because, man, these games have so much potential, and I know these are just gonna get popped out quick. They could be so much better, but they're just not gonna be given the time because they have to fit these deadlines, man. They're gonna have to go in line with when the show is gonna release, and there's gonna be a new season of Pokemon cards, and it's like, oh man, we gotta get this out by the holidays. It's like, dude, we do not need a game every single year. I know this is good for money, but as a product, as a good product, if we're just trying to make the best thing, man, it's not ideal. And it's like, okay, if you guys need help and want to make more games, fine, let's do that. But let's get more studios involved, I guess, or let's hire more people. Let's get more divisions working on Pokemon games, and then we can have Pokemon spin-off type games or games that fill in the gaps and have the main team have the time and ability to work on, like, hey, this is gonna be the big game for the next Switch, and it's really gonna have a lot of resources put into it. When it comes to the role that the actual player has in the world, I think having the player dynamically invested in the environment through its mechanics is what really helps give that sense of wonder that we're looking for in a Pokemon adventure, right? It's an adventure after all. It should feel like one. I think Arceus did a decent job in this regard, making you kind of feel more like a Pokemon investigator or researcher, right? You were given these tasks to go catch a certain amount of Pokemon, or okay, you have to see a certain amount of moves done from a Pokemon or catch it in its habitat, etc. And that was addicting. And I think that was fun. It was a compelling way to complete the Pokedex. It made it very engaging. And overall, I think that helps push the adventurer narrative in the right direction. Another thing that was in Arceus, but we kind of lost in Scarlet and Violet was the ability to really get in and out of battles pretty quick, right? By just kind of throwing your Pokeball and then being able to run around the arena like it's just right right there. That was awesome. I don't know why we took that out. Scarlet and Violet kind of slowed the system down again when battling. Which doesn't make sense, right? You guys have had this great way to speed the process up in Arceus, and the moves came out so fast, and the commands were snappy. All those things together, right? Having the snappy combat paired with the ability to maneuver and throw a Pokeball directly at a Pokemon to battle or circumvent the fight altogether, like, this really made it feel fluid to play, and I don't really see why we needed to go back from that a bit in Scarlet and Violet. I do think it was probably a good thing in Scarlet and Violet to keep things like the gyms, as well as kind of like, you know, an evil group in the game, right? These things are core things of Pokemon, right? And having core things to do is great. Same with having other things to do. Throughout the series, there's always been kind of miscellaneous things to do besides just, you know, battle gyms, fight the evil team, etc. But the thing is, they've not really had all those ideas kind of accumulated into one game, it's very frustrating. I've always thought it was frustrating that we go from one game that has a certain thing, like maybe the Safari Zone or whatever, and then in the next game, it's just not there. It's like, okay, why do we do this? We don't need to remove cool stuff, all right? And I know this is where it comes to like deadlines and that's where it sucks, right? That's the worst part about all of this. It honestly hinders the series so much, and it's so hard to see this changing unless the deadlines change. But like, man, you know, when we went from Gen 5 to Gen 6 and we lost the Pokemon World Tournament, which was like the coolest fucking battle mode, what is going on here? Why do we have to do that? That was so good. Let us have that in the game as a staple thing the player can partake in. Like in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, they had the idea of master trainers for certain Pokemon. And it's like, okay, you don't maybe take that idea directly, but maybe rework this into something where there is a trainer that is like the master of defensive battling. It would be so cool, right? Like, hey, go fight this trainer and learn how to kind of combat stall tactics. Okay, I know that doesn't sound exactly fun, but something like that, right? And these, again, they can just be side things. These are all things that add up. It's like, come on, let's bring all these ideas together that are cool and we've thought of in the past, but then put them into a high fidelity, highly polished, you know, Pokemon game, and that would be so good. Like, imagine all your favorite features throughout the series, but just given the justice that they deserve in a three-dimensional Pokemon game. It would be so awesome. Pokemon has got to change something. Whether it's the deadlines that are given to the team or the team and the amount of staff that they have working on the projects themselves, the pace and quality of the recent Pokemon games, it's just not sustainable. The series really deserves better, you know? Pokemon should have that true 3D, polished, highly reviewed game like so many of these other Nintendo series. I honestly don't know what the next games in the series are gonna look like, or if they're gonna decide to do another take on the Legends series, but whatever it is, I really just hope something over there changes, you know, maybe with the next system. Game Freak or Nintendo or whoever it is calling the shots over there, just let Pokemon be great, please. All right, that's gonna be it for me. Sorry if this got a little ranty, but yeah, everyone who's made it to the end, you guys are the best. I really do appreciate the support recently. We're halfway to 500 subs over here, so if you like what's going on over here, you know, I think you know what to do. Maybe. I mean, I'm not gonna ask. I'm not gonna ask. But yeah, but for real, as always, I'd love to hear what your guys' perspective is on the whole Pokemon thing as well. You know, like, have you been enjoying the latest games? Have you played the DLC? I've not got around to it yet, but let me know, right? With that said, I'm gonna get out of here. I'll catch you on the next video, which will happen sometime soon, I think.